We live aboard our boat, Linda and I, and this Christmas we find ourselves in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, which is the capital city of the province of British Columbia. Victoria was named after Queen Victoria, who was the reigning monarch at the time that this community was founded. It's a small, pleasant place which retains the charm of a much smaller community. And indeed, it makes much of its image of being a kind of Little England with red double-decker buses and cream teas at the Empress Hotel. It's a small, colourful community, very friendly, and not least at Christmas time.
Christmas. The word means many things to many people. To people in the Christian world, it is perhaps the highlight of the year. It evokes images of warmth and light, plenty of food and drink and company, always company. The word Christmas brings to mind glowing memories of past times amongst family and friends, happy and bright pictures of one's early Christmases, and a romanticised notion that all would be well if it was like Christmas all the time. A naive notion, this. Christmas is not that great for millions in the nominally Christian world. Many do not see any difference between Christmas and the rest of the year. Many struggle at Christmas to feed themselves and their families, just as they do all the time. The placing of Christmas at the end of December was somewhat artificial. The date of the birth of Christ is a totally unknown date, but the early Christian church placed it there to take advantage of the fact that for thousands of years in the Northern Hemisphere there has always been a midwinter feast. In the darkness of northern latitudes at midwinter, our primitive forefathers took time off at the darkest, coldest part of the year to have a party. They saved food and fuel and drink to cheer up the shortest days of the year, for after this the days would get longer again and the warming sun would start to return.
By the middle of the 19th century, Victoria was already a thriving seaport, when Vancouver and Seattle were just a few shacks and a handful of dogs. It's also full of these beautifully preserved 19th century buildings. There were also wonderfully eccentric characters, great empire builders who were larger than life.
Christmas in Victoria is the parade of yachts all dressed up for Christmas. Victoria's inner harbour has many boats moored there, and every year dozens of them compete to be the best decorated and prettiest boat on the water. The yachts in the Christmas parade come in all shapes and sizes, from tiny sailboats to large power yachts. Our own yacht, Wintersea, did not take part because we didn't hear of it in time, but we had made the interior as warm and cosy and Christmassy as we could. The little Christmas tree against the old, shiny teak woodwork looked very special indeed. As the clear, bright day slowly turned to December darkness, the boats donned their decorations and lights and prepared for the coming parade. Then they all began their slow progress around the harbour, set in front of the Disneyland-like confection of the British Columbia Parliament building and the huge Christmas tree. Slowly, one by one, the boats appeared and began their stately dance around each other. In and out they weaved, passing in front and behind, as though the whole thing had been carefully choreographed. This large sail training ship in active service with the Canadian Navy is Her Majesty's Canadian ship Oriole. Year after year she shows up at the Christmas parade to show the flag. Out of the darkness came the jolly sound of a marimba band. No one at first could make out which vessel the music was coming from, but the happy sound took over the night as the boats continued their circles to impress the judges. The music's not coming from the Oriole, nor is it coming from these smaller boats. Ah, here it is. The band is on the foredeck of the catamaran Tango from the United States. The music's not at all Christmassy, but it warms everyone. The crews on the boats and the thousands of spectators lining the harbour side. Up and down and round they circled, a surreal spectacle amidst the darkness of the night. And shining like the Christmas star on its deck, the Canadian ship Oriole towered over all the rest. One of the eccentric empire builders was Sir James Douglas, who was born in Guyana, Central America, to a Scottish father and a black mother from Barbados. He became a senior administrator of the Hudson's Bay Company and eventually governor of the colony of British Columbia. He is considered one of the founding fathers of British Columbia and helped establish many of its institutions. He made the original Fort Victoria into the capital of the new British colony. Victoria became the supply centre of the gold rushes of the 1850s and 60s in British Columbia, which swelled Victoria's population from 300 to several thousands almost overnight. He did not, however, prevent the Canadian Pacific Railway from establishing the transcontinental terminus in Vancouver, thus assuring Vancouver of eventual economic supremacy. Before his death in 1877, Queen Victoria had made him a Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, a great honour indeed for a colonial who had rarely visited Britain. In the days leading up to Christmas Eve, Victoria becomes a kaleidoscope of coloured lights with music and crowds, elaborately decorated shop windows and more crowds. The streets are alive with people all anxious to complete their shopping, each with a list of purchases, careful to make the right choice of gift for the right person. Cynics might say, and they do, that this is all Christmas is about these days, that it's all about people scurrying around buying gifts that nobody needs or wants with money they don't have, and that depressing reality sets in when the credit card bills come in January. But in the sober light of a Victoria morning, in a quiet corner of the city, I reflected that even though the modern Christmas has been grotesquely commercialized, there remains at its heart a warm, rich core. Families who rarely meet take pains at Christmas to renew their common roots.
It's appropriate that we're spending Christmas here in Victoria, because the kind of Christmas, the quality of the Christmas that we spend in the Western world is essentially Victorian in spirit. Queen Victoria had very German roots, and her beloved husband was actually born in Germany. They were very, very much in love, and eventually they had 9 children. It's not known whether they were aware of what was causing all of those births, but in order to make Prince Albert feel more at home, Queen Victoria imported a great many German Christmas traditions.
There is rarely a white Christmas here, for the climate is very maritime. Out on the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which separates the United States from Canada, the weather is grey, wet and gloomy. It is very different from the jolly bustle of nearby Victoria. Out on the straits, the commerce of the world goes on, Christmas or not, with cargo ships from the far corners of the world passing through here to get to or from the great seaports of Vancouver and Seattle. At Windsor Castle, near the present-day London Airport at Heathrow, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert celebrated a very German Christmas. The whole of the castle was decorated with candles and Christmas trees. The fireplaces were aglow with the crackle and warmth of a wood-burning fire. Christmas Eve was the highlight of the whole festival, with an elaborate dinner for the large royal family. In the kitchens, sculleries and pantries of the castle, the vast domestic staff enjoyed their Christmas dinner whenever and wherever they could. But whoever they were, from lowly kitchen maid to the exalted master of the royal household, they would be sure to receive a gift from the Queen. A gift, of course, appropriate to their station. But Queen Victoria's Christmas traditions couldn't help this homeless person here in Victoria. On Christmas Eve, we spotted our friendly neighbourhood blue heron, who lives at the end of our dock. He was stalking his Christmas dinner in the shallows of our nearby breakwater. He's very patient and graceful, and always finds something to pounce on. Our heron seems to live all alone, but he seems very content. It was pleasant to take time away from the Victoria Christmas bustle and wander about in this most beautiful city. The buildings are historic and grand, the inner harbour is tranquil, and there is a feeling that great things have happened here.
For Queen Victoria, Christmas was always more than just the Christmas trees, the presents and the Christmas cards. Cards having been made popular because of the introduction of the cheap penny post in the early years of her reign. No, for the Queen, Christmas was an opportunity to uphold family values, to share her prosperity with others, and to celebrate the simple values of Christmas itself.
Victoria is full of these narrow pedestrian alleys, full of shops and restaurants. These are particularly busy at Christmas time. How it got its name Trounce Alley, and who it was that was trounced, we do not know. It was the gold rushes in British Columbia that first brought the Chinese to Victoria around 1858. They came first of all to work directly in the goldfields, using Victoria as a jumping-off point. They set up tents and shacks along the waterfront at Johnson Street close by here. Soon they were joined by Chinese tailors and cobblers, suppliers, outfitters and clothes washers who gave support to the miners. Later came more Chinese who found work in factories, laundries, restaurants and logging camps. Later still were the thousands of single men who came to help build the transcontinental railway that linked the west coast to the rest of Canada. These men, who were treated as very much second-class citizens, sent large amounts of money back to China to help support their families there. Before the end of the 19th century, the Chinese community, known, as in many North American cities, as Chinatown, had located itself here in Fiskard Street. Here we find Fan Tan Alley, which is little more than a hole in the wall at its beginning. Proceeding down Fan Tan Alley, it widens out slightly and is full of funky shops of all kinds and descriptions. And also curious addresses. This carillon is a musical instrument consisting of 62 bronze bells, which are played by a musician sitting at a keyboard in the top of the tower by hitting on the keys with the fists and by pressing the keys of a pedal keyboard with the feet. The keys activate wires and levers that move the clappers that strike the bells. This carillon in its tower is the Netherlands Centennial Carillon. It was given by the Dutch community of BC in thanks for the part Canada played in the liberation of Holland from the Nazis in the Second World War. And the cornerstone was unveiled by Queen Juliana of the Netherlands in 1967, Canada's centennial year. Charles Dickens described Christmas as a good time, a kind, forgiving, pleasant, charitable time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of other people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. In Victorian London, because of the huge success of his short novel, A Christmas Carol, which was widely bought and read, Dickens' name became synonymous with the Christmas that Victoria and Albert had brought from Germany. So it was that at his death in 1870, one little girl in London was heard to wail, "Mr. Dickens dead? Then will Father Christmas die too?" In the years that have followed Dickens' death in 1870, there have been many plays and movies made based on his novel, A Christmas Carol, and these works are performed annually very frequently. Many great actors have played the hard-hearted Scrooge. Alastair Sim, George C. Scott, and more recently Jim Carrey have all brought their own interpretations to the role. In theatres across Canada, an annual treat for many families is to go and see a stage production of this gem. It's as though it has not been a proper Christmas without seeing A Christmas Carol.
So Christmas at Windsor Castle was always full of beautifully decorated and candlelit Christmas trees. There was lavish giving of gifts. There were elaborate Christmas meals. But all of it tempered by a real concern for the poor. Prince Albert and Queen Victoria were very conscious of their privileged status, and at Christmas they went out of their way to help poor people, particularly those around Windsor Castle in the town of Windsor, to have a slightly better and brighter Christmas.
The excitement of Christmas is given expression in the musical art form that has been in existence for 1,000 years, the Christmas Carol. These pieces of music were devised by often anonymous authors, and many are consummately beautiful works, made even more pleasurable by their simplicity. These songs are the sung versions of the poetry of the people. We all have our favourite Christmas carols. One of mine is I Saw Three Ships. I saw three ships come sailing in on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. And what was in those ships all three on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day? Well, the original version we shall never know about. But in one version, sung by wandering minstrels in Europe hundreds of years ago, what was in those ships were the skulls of the three wise men being taken to Cologne Cathedral in Germany, where there were three skulls of the alleged three wise men kept as holy relics. During the hundreds of years since then, the contents of those three ships have changed and changed again. Another favourite is good King Wenceslas, who, as we know, set out to be generous to a poor old man at Christmas, whom he saw in the valley below his castle, gathering winter fuel. This carol was not written until the 1840s, but was about a king in what is now the modern Czech Republic, who was something of a tyrant and was murdered by a disgruntled relative over 1,000 years ago. Some good King Wenceslas. My very favourite carol is Silent Night, which was written by an Austrian priest, Father Moore, to a tune by his friend Franz Gruber. At midnight mass in 1818 in Oberndorf in Austria, the two men sang the song assisted by the church choir. Perhaps the carol might have died after its debut had not an organ repairman, Karl Maracher, who travelled around the district in the years afterwards, giving copies of the carol to some of his church clients. Then, two singing families, much like the famous Von Trapps of Sound of Music fame, started using the carol in their Christmas concerts. The rest, as they say, is history. So the development of the Christmas carol from early pagan songs of the winter solstice to be the musical centrepiece of our modern Christmas, both sacred and profane, has been fascinating. Over all presides the gilded statue of Captain George Vancouver, the British naval officer who had explored and charted the waters of this part of the world and, very importantly, had conducted the negotiations with the Spanish which ensured Britain's future domination of this region. Seeing these two grand buildings, the British Columbia Legislature on the left and the old Canadian Pacific Shipping Company on the right, reminds one of another great eccentric in the history of Victoria, the architect Francis Rattenbury, who designed these and many buildings here. But his story deserves a programme all of its own. Let's now jump aboard this carriage drawn by these great patient horses and go up the hill of Fort Street to the castle. The castle is Craigdorrit Castle, which is now a Victoria landmark and tourist attraction. It's not really a castle, but a late 19th century Victorian house. It was built by Robert Dunsmuir, a Scottish immigrant, who is regarded by some people as a tenacious, hard-working, far-seeing industrialist who built his fortune in coal mining and railway building. But by others he's regarded as a tyrannical, ruthless, hard-hearted robber baron who got rich on the backs of poor immigrant Chinese labourers and miners. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between.
As the might and power and influence of Great Britain increased throughout the world during the 19th century, Queen Victoria's vision and practice of Christmas spread through the Western world. Here we are in Victoria, celebrating a Victorian Christmas.
On Christmas Eve, we return to the comforting warmth of Wintersea. Christmas is nothing without friends and family and good cheer, and that is what Queen Victoria's Christmases are all about. For us, it's been a very good, happy Christmas. And who knows where we will have voyaged to by this time next year when Christmas comes round again. Merry Christmas to you all.